Welcome to the TFD Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Sullivan, and this is the show where we break down popular science into easily digestible and actionable information to give you the blueprint to be a high performer in your life. Today, our guest is Amy Goblursh, also known as the Running Dietitian. Amy is a registered dietitian and runner who has completed a number of half marathons, full marathons, and ultra endurance events. Her passion for helping runners stems from being one herself and experiencing the negative outcomes that come with being underfueled and diet focused. Amy helps runners all over the world avoid that by promoting her no-diet, performance-centric approach to help fuel their optimal performance to reach their running goals. In this episode, we break down everything you need to know about nutrition for running. We discuss what is most important for shorter distance runs, such as the 5 and 10 kilometer, how that changes when you move into the half and full marathon distance, and the nutrition required to complete ultra endurance events. If you are a runner or into running, then this is an absolute must listen. Let's get to it. All right, welcome to another episode of the TFD Performance Podcast. Today is going to be a very, very, very cool episode. I am joined by Amy Goblursh. I hope I pronounced that right, Amy.
You got it right.
I was practicing that mentally and I was a little worried I was going to get that wrong there, but you guys might know Amy better as the Running Dietitian on Instagram. She has quite a big following actually, and she specializes in nutrition for running. So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. Amy, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. I always get so excited when I can talk all things like nutrition, running, really put my two passions together.
I was going to say that was going to be my first question because you and I are both dietitians. We went through training there and we're talking a little affair. It's a bit weird, really, when you go in sports nutrition and you niche yourself off in a different sport. I know people listening would probably think, oh, why is that so weird? We're just pretty much not taught to do that when we're at university. Why did you decide to do that? Why did you decide to go, you know what, I'm going to specialize with runners and that's what I'm going to commit my working life to?
It kind of fell into my lap. Like when I was in school, no one really taught us about having a private practice, what that looks like. It's definitely something I wish I knew was an option because taking some business or marketing classes would have been beneficial. But I had a running company reach out to me, a run coaching company asked if I wanted to come on board. And I was like, yes, like I can talk, like help runners out. And that's how it really first started. And then I realized like, wow, like if I really put some like more time, more effort into this, like this can be my full-time job.
And you're obviously a runner yourself, Amy.
I am.
When did you get into that? Was it something that you've always done? Did you do other sports and then running was something on the side and later on you just decided, yes, I absolutely love this? Or how did that passion come?
I ran in junior high and high school. I did not take it seriously, did not put a lot of time or effort into it. And I was involved with other sports as well. And then in college, I really started to run a lot more, signed up for a half marathon, did a full marathon while I was in college too. And that's where I really found this passion and actually really enjoyed running as well. And it wasn't just a punishment anymore.
It's funny, hey, because I've recently gotten into it too. And I was exactly the same in that I used to just hate it. It was such a chore. Like it was, and I really struggled with it too, like mentally really struggled with doing it. But I find a lot of people, and especially when I talk to runners who are actually really good at it, they all say that, right? Like, oh, I just fell in love with it. What is it that you think is that? What is that thing that drags people in and they go, you know what? And they finally get over that mental barrier and it's like, yeah, you know what? I really love it. What is it about it that attracts people and makes people stick to it?
I think a lot has to do with like finishing the run and like experiencing what is called the runner's high. And it can mean something different to every single runner, but just feeling like you really pushed your body, that you accomplished something. And it's funny because it's not like it happens on every run and you might go like months in between, but when that feeling happens, you're like on top of the world.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into it because I want to cover quite a bit here and we'll break this up and we'll talk about short, middle and long distance running. Short, we'll talk more about the 5 and 10Ks. Middle, we'll talk about half marathons and marathons. And then when we talk about the longer ones, that crazy stuff people do is the ultra endurance stuff, which I know you're involved in as well. So you must be a bit of a nut job, but let's go back and we'll talk about the short distance stuff. when we're talking about nutrition for runs with like 5 and 10Ks, talk us through what type of nutrition are you doing for those type of things?
Typically for a 5K and 10K, a lot of that nutrition is going to come into play before. Typically, it's such a short distance, short time on your feet that fueling during isn't going to come into play. So it's really starting off on the right foot by starting off with your body being fueled and ready to perform, and really focusing on carbs. I know when it comes to the diet culture world, and even your different thoughts about carbs, is they can really be put down. But carbs are so vital to your body, and it's your body's preferred source of fuel. And especially for that performance piece, so important. So really focusing on incorporating those carbs and setting yourself up for success for the run or the race.
Yeah, so we'll go back to that one. So during the shorter ones, the 5 and 10Ks, because they generally are a bit shorter, does that mean that the intra-fueling probably isn't as big of a consideration as, like you said, what you're doing before you start that race?
Yeah, typically if you're running a 5K, 10K, I typically don't see anyone taking in fuel. There could be a few that just feel a little bit better if they do so, but typically it's going to come into play more into that half marathon and longer distance.
How's this, Amy? How do you handle it if you get a client and they go, Amy, you know what? Like, I love running and I love getting up, but I do it in the morning. And I get up in the morning and you're saying, hey, Bobby, you need to fuel when you get up and you need to fuel that run. They go, oh, Amy, I can't. Like, I can't eat before I run in the morning. What do you say to them?
So we can talk about like what is hard about eating in the morning. Is it you're somebody that needs more time to digest before you go for a run? And I understand getting up any earlier isn't always an option or one that someone even wants to consider. So if they are an individual that also does half marathons or those longer runs where they take in fuel during one, I talk about let's use that source. So if you typically like those gels, that can be your fuel for your early morning run as well. Your body is already used to taking it in during the run, that you can either take it in right before you head out the door or during that first mile, and it should be fairly well digested and absorbed. Another thing is sometimes it's training your gut and thinking about if you're not used to anything, can we start with like a half a graham cracker, a half a slice of bread, something along those lines, and build up from there.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Amy, is that concept of training your gut, because it's something that a lot of people really don't, it's quite foreign to them, right? Like it's a strange concept, right? Like I think it's very easy for people to think, oh, you go to a gym and you lift weights and you train your biceps and you'll get that adaptation, you'll see change in your muscles. But when it comes to training something like your gut, it's a bit of a foreign concept. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so it for a lot of runners, it's not natural to be able to take in fuel right before or even during the run. And when you see those gel packets, some of them seem large and it's very intimidating. And it might feel like way too much in the beginning, but it's exactly what your body needs. So we'll talk about taking a half a gel, taking a few bites of something pre-run. And as your body's used to that, as your body is more accepting of that, okay, now let's try 3/4 of the gel, or let's try the whole gel, or a few more bites to see if you're able to tolerate that, and then just start building from there. And that is one way to get used to taking in fuel either right before or during the run, if that is a foreign concept to you.
Yeah, great. And the reason you're taking in carbs, Amy, can you explain why is it that these runners, even if you're doing the 5 and 10K, why are the carbs so important?
The carbs are your body's fuel source. So I like to use the analogy of it's like putting the right type of fuel in your car. So if you have a car that doesn't take diesel fuel, putting in that wrong type of fuel isn't going to end well. But when you put in the right fuel into your car, it's going to run so much better. And thinking about your body the same way, if you're not fueling or putting in fuel that maybe doesn't feel as good to your body, it's not going to go well on the run. Versus when you give your body those carbs, what it really responds best to, it's going to be a smooth ride or a smooth run for you.
Yeah, excellent. And obviously, we're talking as if these guys are just doing, say, if they've signed up for a 5K or a 10K. But even if you're doing that, there's a lot of training that goes involved. If you've never run before and you're training for like a 5 and 10K, what's the importance of nutrition for those training runs?
So really that pre-run fuel is going to be important. Maybe if you're training for a 10K, you might get into some double-digit runs depending on your training plan. So maybe fuel might come into play a little bit during it. But otherwise, like post-run fuel is going to be so important as well, because that is going to be what your body uses to recover so that you're ready to do it again that next day. And if you're delaying your recovery process, that next run probably isn't going to go very well. Your sleep could be disrupted, your energy, your mood, all of those things are going to be negatively impacted if you don't help your body recover.
I think that's another area, right? People forget about the recovery period. I think we just get so focused on train, train, train. What can I do to maximize the training session? It's like, well, man, like you only train as hard as you're recovering. If your recovery is terrible, your next training session is probably not going to be very good. What are some things for these guys? What can they be ensuring? Obviously, you said getting the extra carbs in afterwards. Is there anything else they can do to help their recovery?
Protein is going to be important as well to help your muscles rebuild, recover. Hydration, potentially even electrolyte replacement as well. It's kind of like thinking of your tank and, rebuilding it up, refilling it up so that your body can regenerate. And again, just like you said, be ready to go for that next training session.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a pretty good covering of the shorter distance if you're going 5 and 10K. Like you said, Amy, like recapping that, it's probably more the pre-fueling that's really important, just purely because of the time that's going to take you to run it. Intra is probably not as huge, but the post is really, really important. When you move on to say those more middle distance events and you're going longer, say the half marathon, and we're going to get lost in translation here. I appreciate it between miles and kilometers. So I apologize for everyone listening at home. But if you're moving on to the half marathon and then into the marathon, how do those nutrition kit considerations change?
So thinking about pre-run is that carbs are still going to be the focal point, but now you might want to add in a little bit more protein to it because that's going to help you feel satisfied longer. That can help for a little bit more of those later miles. And so really thinking about any run that's going to be over an hour, especially over 90 minutes, adding in that protein. And then any run over 90 minutes is where I highly recommend fueling during the run. And this doesn't mean, okay, I'm running an hour 45, so that means at an hour and a half, I'll take in some fuel. No, you start fueling right from the beginning during that run. And again, it's keeping your body from running on E. Once you get into that negative hole of being underfueled during the run, it is so hard to build yourself out of it. So trying as hard as you can to stay on top of it so that you don't hit the wall, so you don't have those moments of fatigue, low energy.
Can you explain, what do you mean by that? When you say hit the wall, Amy, what's that mean?
It is not legit hitting a brick wall, but it's that feeling that your body just did because your glycogen stores, so that's where your stored form of carbs go, and your body utilizes them during a run. And many runners will run out around the 90 minutes, maybe even 2 hour mark. So that's why for half marathons, it's really important to take in those carbs during the run because it prevents you from running on E. And it's just this feeling of dread, fatigue, like absolutely no energy to continue on during the run or even the race.
I'm assuming at some stage in your running career, does this happen to you? Do you remember the first time you hit the wall?
Oh my gosh, so many times. Like I said, I ran my first marathon in college. I didn't know people took in calories, took in carbs during runs. Like I had no idea. And I ran so many long runs without water too. So I definitely know what it's like to be fueled, to be dehydrated, all of those things. I always say like, this is why I teach it because I've been there. I know how crappy you feel when you're running like that, but I also know how good running can feel when you're giving your body what it needs. I still remember during my first marathon, they were giving out gels at mile 17. I was like, what are these for? And I was like, oh, everyone's taking them. I guess I'll take one too. And I remember I had hit the wall at mile 15, and then I think I got a little energy boost. And then at mile like 22, 23, I was just like, when will this be over? Because I had given myself one gel to try and perform and run off of during that race.
I want to get a bit more of an idea of that feeling. So because that sounds horrible to me. We talk about in a lot of our field with combat sports. So if you have a bad, what we call like a weight cut, when you're reducing that weight the week before, you can really if you do it badly, we call it like losing your legs. And it's a terrible, terrible feeling to be like in a locked cage or a ring with another human who's trying to punch your head off or kick your head off or whatever. And you lose your legs and you really struggle to handle your own body weight. Is it something like that where you like literally feel like your body can't move underneath itself? Or
I would say, like, in what I experienced, it's been very similar. It's like your legs just feel so heavy. It feels like it's hard to take any sort of steps. Those like negative feelings, those negative mindsets like come into play during that too. And it just feels like a struggle fest.
that's an interesting point, and something can we touch on a little bit here. You're obviously fueling the physical. Like you said, you want to keep those muscle glycogen stores up and you want to be getting those carbs in to avoid that horrible feeling of hitting the wall. But are you also, to an extent, fueling the mental side of it so you don't get caught in those negative mind loops?
You definitely, I mean, I feel like it's so easy when you're running or performing to like have these negative thoughts of like, why is this feeling harder? Like it felt so easy during training runs. Like, why is it feeling harder? But it's like trying not to give that mental side. And even when you're hitting the wall, like, are you going to dig yourself even deeper if you let your mind take over with those negative thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're talking about some type of strategy for someone who's, say, doing a half marathon or a marathon, and they want to do this thing that we're talking about, this training your gut, they've gone out their first session, they've tried it, they go, oh, that was not very fun. I didn't feel very good. What are some techniques that they can use to try and get that tolerance up and train their gut?
I think taking notes first and foremost, as especially if this is new to you, is so important. And it's something like when I was training for my ultra marathon that I realized like every third gel, I was just dreading it because I'm like, I don't want a gel. And it was only by writing it down that I realized, the past 3 weeks, I have struggled with that third fuel. It's time to put something else in there that isn't a gel. So I'm more excited for it. I'm not dreading it. I actually take it. So I think it is really good to like take note of like, did you ever feel low energy? Did you not like the consistency? Did it sit funny? Like those are things that it's really important to take note of because it can help you understand if there's something that isn't working a little bit faster than if you would just try to like, well, I think I was okay last week. I don't really remember. So just having that to like fall back on and take a look into.
Yeah, try and take the guesswork out of it. Are there things other than gels that people can be using, or gels are the only carbs that they want to be getting in during these races or training sessions?
No, there are so many different types of products. So, like, there's the sports nutrition products. Gels are probably the most popular. A lot of the same companies that make the gels will make like gummy chews, or they might have a liquid calorie and carb product as well. But I feel like more and more runners are turning to non sports nutrition products. So, like Pop Tarts, granola bars, pretzels, potatoes, like just items you might even already have in your pantry. Applesauce pouches or like toddler infant food pouches are a really popular option as well. So those can be another thing to turn to because sometimes gels can be a little bit more upsetting for some runners. And so I always say like not being able to handle a gel is never an excuse like to not take in fuel. You just need to trial and error until you figure out what your body responds best to.
We might have to go back to that Pop Tarts comment, Amy, because I'm sure a lot of people listening will go, "Oh my god, I can eat Pop Tarts when I'm running." Can you explain why is it that they can eat all of these different carbs, or what people probably they're going to listen to this and say, "What? That's like such a high sugary, quote unquote, bad food. I can have that during my run."
I know they're going to be like, this dietitian is telling me to eat Pop Tarts. What is going on? And I think a lot of it goes to like, what is a Pop Tart? It's pretty much all carbs. And that is what you want for fuel. during the run. So it's just a pretty convenient. It tastes fairly well. It usually sits okay option to be able to use for fuel during a run. Or I even had athletes that are working towards Ironman really like the Pop Tarts for fuel as well.
And the reason you're doing this, is it because you want to hit certain amounts of numbers? Because obviously, if you look at the packet of a Pop Tart, there's quite a lot of carbs in there, and some people might be off put by that. But when you're doing this, you're obviously burning quite a lot of carbs. And like we're saying, you want to avoid that hitting the wall and feeling like absolute terrible on death's door. You want to avoid that at all costs. So you want to get these high carb. Is there an amount of carbs that you should be shooting for at a certain time period, or how does that work?
So if you are training for a half or a full marathon, you're going to want to aim for 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. You might have heard like sports nutrition guidelines of, oh, fuel every 30 to 45 minutes, but that can leave you under fueled. You can take in one gel, and a lot of gels are about 20 to 25 grams. So if you're taking it every 45 minutes, you're not quite hitting that 30 to 60 amount. So I like with clients to base it more on how many grams of carbs are you getting per hour versus you need to take something in every 30 to 45 minutes.
I'm just trying to quickly Google here how many carbs are in a Pop Tart, so we can get an idea of how many Pop Tarts you would have to have. Do you know off the top of your head?
I want to say like 48, but I could be mistaken. And I know there's a difference between the Pop Tarts and the Pop Tart like bites. um,
America is the best for this type of food, though. I don't think we have the Pop Tart bites, but they sound phenomenal. Let's just say, even if they were like 40 grams, that's on the lower end, right? So that's on the lower end of the 30 to 60 grams per hour. So you'd almost be wanting to having that plus some more each hour, right?
Yes, and that's where I found like a lot of runners will also have their electrolyte drink, and many electrolyte drinks can have some grams of carbs as well. So typically they might be able to just have the Pop Tart and they can eat it some point within that initial hour, and also have it with their electrolyte drink slash carb drink. And then that starts over that next hour trying to get in whatever their liquid ends up needing to be, but also having another Pop Tart at that time. Or if they like a lot of variety, which I have clients that want a different a different fuel source every hour because they get sick of it.
That's what was going to be my next question, Amy. Is it okay to mix up your sources? Because I'm sure if you're doing this for quite a while, or if you're really focused in, you might get a bit of palate fatigue with these things. Like you were saying with the gel, and you're just, instead of looking at it going, yes, I'm going to fuel up, you're going, oh God, I'm going to have another gel. It's going to be so bad. Can you mix this in with other things like fruit or other sources, or?
Yeah, as long as you're like meeting those guidelines and really focusing on those carbs too, like as long as it kind of fits within there, as long as it sits okay, and as long as it feels energizing to you, it doesn't matter what you do.
And what about on your training runs? Now, obviously, not every training run is going to be like a race simulation where you go out and you just go hell for leather and you're trying to hit your marathon time, because we all know that would never work out. Is this the same concept if you're doing those slower, easy runs, and if you're doing, say, I don't know, tempo runs or faster runs?
Yes, I recommend if you're going to be running over those 90 minutes to fuel carrying, because even if it's a slower run, your body's still going to need it. And if it's like that faster, like tempo or marathon pace run, like that's a good time to still take in fuel, because sometimes it can be easier when you're going at that slower pace, which you're versus when you're really pushing it, going at that faster pace. And that might be an eye-opening experience of like, this is a little bit harder, where some of the packets can be hard to open. And so it's like, if you're going with those chews, it's like, put them in a baggie, so that you just need to open the baggie versus you're trying to fumble to open that package while you're trying to keep pace.
That's probably something people don't appreciate, right? Is like the physical logistics of getting the food in. Like, it's all well and good to be like, oh, I've got a Pop Tart here and it, but it's in foil pack, right? That you've got to unfold, and then you've somehow got to get it. You got to chew it and then swallow it. How do you go about, like, is that something that you work on with your clients? And you're like, I need to help you to get better at physically eating this food?
Sometimes it is. Yeah, it's definitely talking about, okay, what are you running this weekend? Okay, if you're not doing very much marathon pace during your long run, let's try to fuel during one of your marathon paced workouts so that you are going to be at a little bit faster pace and you can understand, is it easier? Is it harder to get in? Are there anything we need to do for workarounds? Since that is going to be ideally the pace you're going to be running on race day.
Yeah, absolutely. We've spoken about carbs pretty much at depth. What about hydration? How do people go about hydration? Because obviously you're getting a bit of volume with the carbohydrate, but you obviously don't want to be too dehydrated. So you're getting fluid in. Is there ideal amounts of fluid that you're aiming to get during these trainings?
Yes, and I would say most runners are probably not taking in enough like liquid, so either or enough fluids, whether that's from their water, their electrolyte drink, and or their drink that might be providing calories and carbs as well. So ideally, you'll be drinking 16 to 20 ounces per hour of activity. And, even on those shorter runs, those 3 to 4 mile runs, how much better could it feel if you're in that optimal hydration state versus, when it's 90 degrees out, it's full sun, and you're like, well, I don't need water. And it's like, yeah, you probably can get through this run without water, but would it go better? Would you recover a little bit better if you're staying hydrated and not getting too dehydrated during it?
That's a good point, Amy. What do you do if you have runners that go, hey, Amy, I can do like 9, 10 miles and I feel okay. And I feel okay doing it. And I don't want to bother doing this. I don't want to be drinking 20 ounces of fluid every 20 minutes. I don't want to be having my little gels. I don't want to be doing this. What do you say to those guys?
Most of the time, I don't have that issue because it's about, comparing. Okay, so you ran this long run, fasted, you didn't take any water with you. Are you willing to try to take some fuel with you? Actually, take it in during the run, but also take water with you as well. And usually they can feel enough of a difference between the two that they're like, okay, I know I don't want to. I know it's kind of a hassle to make sure I have a way to carry it, both the water and potentially the sports nutrition product as well. But that difference makes up for it for how they feel.
If we're going back to the fluids, is it okay just to be having water on those runs? Or like you said, should you be mixing in electrolytes or should you be having sports drinks? Or how do you navigate all of that?
Usually for runs over an hour, electrolytes are really going to be important. And, as we're getting to summer now, that it takes some time for your body to acclimate to the heat. And electrolytes really are important to make sure that you're not having an electrolyte imbalance, that you're not having a decrease in performance because you're not replacing the sodium and other electrolytes that you're losing via sweat.
That's a big talking point. I remember one of the first things that I actually remember that stuck with me when I did sports nutrition at university was I remember our sports nutrition lecturer showed us a video of someone running a marathon, and we were talking about the importance of putting electrolytes in and not just having water because of that risk of hyponatremia. Can you explain that a little bit to us?
Yeah, so like your body is, as you're sweating, you're losing sodium, potassium, and other electrolytes via your sweat. And so if you're not replacing it, if you're only drinking water, you do end up with hyponatremia. You're having this electrolyte imbalance, and muscle cramping is a huge sign. And one of the ones that I think runners notice the most when they do have that imbalance.
Yeah, gosh, I'm not sure if you're a big cramper. I'm not a big cramper, but I remember the first time. Obviously, this must have happened when I was playing rugby back in the day, and I just did not replace it. And I've never, ever had something more debilitating happen to me in exercise than getting these like terrible hamstring and calf cramps. So that is due to your hydration and electrolytes, eh?
Yes, it is. And it's something can be prevented. And it's about like knowing what to do and like what you feel like your body needs in order to prevent that from getting to that point.
Yeah, excellent. Now I think that's a pretty good explanation if you are training for the half marathon, if you are training for a marathon, fuel is important, right? And you said anything over the 60, 90 minutes, you need to be getting that intro, you want to be getting your carbs, play around with the different sources. You can have Pop Tarts because you're obviously burning a lot of carbohydrates here, and you want to avoid hitting the wall. And like we spoke about, that post training or post run is going to be really important for that recovery. What are some, when we talk about this and we go into like that crazy world of ultra endurance and you're going plus the 42 kilometers, or I think it's the 26 miles plus 26 miles for you guys that use your own system that no one else in the world uses. If you're doing over that, yeah, if you go over that distance, it's in an ultra marathon, but that can be anywhere from, like you said, just over the 26 miles to days on end, days and days on end. So obviously that is a huge nutrition challenge in itself. How do you even go about comprehending that? And then how do you go about strategizing that for an athlete?
It's so going to be individualized, and also like, what is the distance? Because like you said, like there is an ultra marathon, is that I think it's called like just the ultra marathon or something along that, and I think it's like 26.5 when 26.2 is a marathon, so it is like just just over, versus like, are you doing a 250-mile race? And it's like, so such a big difference. And I think it's also realizing like when you are getting to that 50 plus miles, and maybe even for some runners at that 31 or 50K point, that you're probably not only going to be taking in gels or that sports nutrition product, because that's going to get really tiresome really quick. And it's even like when you go to the aid stations, it's like pretzels, potato chips, like wraps, sandwiches, pizza, pasta sometimes. And so it's like all these other different options, and maybe something that you normally wouldn't do if you're just out for a long run yourself. And so I think like variety is really important, and also knowing that the longer the race, there could be a bigger chance of dealing with nausea, not wanting to take anything, but also knowing you still need it in order to support what you're asking your body to do.
We might have to wind back there and go back to the pizza and pasta comment there. Let's break that down a little bit. So, because I know people listening to this are going to think, what, you're running in a race and you can eat pizza and pasta. Can you explain that a bit more?
Some aid stations, especially for those longer races, start having like more actual foods, like what you might eat at a meal on the course, because you are just burning through so much. You are needing so much to continue this. I mean, a lot of the 100-mile races that are going on, people are like out there for 20 some hours, like a full day, that a gel every 30 minutes isn't going to be enough, and probably isn't going to feel good if that's all you're doing for that period of time.
And do those principles still stick for how often you want to be fueling? Like, do you want to be doing the 30, 60 grams carbs per hour and still trying to hit that on these really long runs?
No, so typically you're going to want to aim for 60 to 90, and maybe even more than that per hour. So your needs are going to be so much higher because you're working the same amount, but maybe you're doing it over the course of a day versus the course of like 4 hours.
Holy smokes. And I assume that's the same for hydration, right? Like you said, if we're getting in, I think you said the 16 to 20 fluid ounces per, was it 20 minutes that you said? That's obviously going to be
per hour.
Per hour. So every hour, is that still the same recommendation for these longer runs?
Usually that stays the same, but of course, like depending on where and when, like the temperature can make be a big factor that is could potentially increase it.
I guess if we're thinking about this from like a 5 and 10K, there's obviously going to be unique challenges for each individual, right? Like getting used to all of this, and obviously still in that half marathon. But when you get into these really long ones, like you said, 20 something hours is a pretty long time to be outside and be actively exercising and then still eating. What are some of the biggest challenges those guys face when they're trying to do that and get their nutrition right?
I think nausea, like getting sick of taking in food, palate fatigue, those are going to be big concerns. And when I've helped an individual train for a 50 and 100-mile race, like those were all things we were preparing her for and working through. Okay, maybe we start fueling a little bit more frequently to help you like either break it up or just try to get in more and get used to being not wanting to take it, but knowing you want to. And I think also relying on those liquid calories as well, because they can really help bulk it up without that palate fatigue coming into play as much.
And what's going to be the biggest benefit from getting this right for these guys? Like, I imagine there's obviously that physical side of it, but does the mental side must be massive in those events, right?
Definitely. And I think it's keeping your mind strong so that your body can be strong as well. There's a quote that is like, your mind will give out way before your legs will. And so I think it's putting together a plan, practicing that plan, and having confidence that it's going to carry you through on race day, and knowing that there might be mishaps, but if there's that mishap, what can you do to stay on track and not lose your composure?
And you were talking about the aid stations there. Now, with the ultra endurance events, the aid stations probably aren't as frequent, say, as like a marathon. How are you getting around that? Are you getting these guys carrying packs, and are they carrying just packets of Pop Tarts in their packs or whatever? Or how are you guys planning to get it in between the aid stations when they're stopping?
So most of the time you're carrying like a pack with your products in, with a hydration pack, maybe even your own electrolytes as well. And then a lot of times courses will have a drop bag. So you'll be able to put some backups in there. For the ultra I did, it was a 50K. So I had my drop bag at mile 10, and then we did a little loop, came back at mile 12. I skipped it at mile 10, and then on mile 12, I just added some more options because I didn't want to carry it for the first 12 miles, but knew I would need it for the second part of that race.
And was that one up in the mountains in the trails, or did you do that on road?
It was in Arizona, so it was like rocky terrain and kind of like ran around a mountain. So there was some like switchbacks and everything. And as I told Jordan, I'm from Minnesota. It's like relatively flat here. And I didn't realize the elevation was as crazy as it was. And it was about 3,000 feet of a elevation gain, which isn't too bad for some of the trail races out there, but I only thought it was 1,000 until the night before when I found out. So I had a little bit of a panic attack about that, but then I realized like it might take you longer, like you can still do this. And I also knew that it's a good thing I packed way more products for food to take in, because my time went from, okay, maybe I'll finish it in 5 hours, to like, is this going to take me like 8 hours to get through? And so like having those more options than what you need. And this was my first ultra, and I was like, wow, the aid stations have like wraps and sandwiches, chips and pretzels, like so many like food options to choose from. That definitely made it possible for me to get a little bit closer to my goal than what I thought.
That was going to be my next question, is obviously running on a road, or just running if you go outside, even in like a flat park terrain, is pretty different if you're running around a mountainside or whatever, or anything that has elevation. Do you change your strategy if you're depending on what type of terrain that you're doing it?
Definitely. And your shoes might change as well. So I got like special shoes that had a rock plate in them to help protect the bottom of my foot from getting bruised. So that definitely comes into play. And, especially when there are a lot of switchbacks, I know there are runners that'll just fly through them. Pace doesn't change, but I found myself in a group where we were kind of like power walking through the really steep parts and then running on the downhills or the more straight parts. And so yeah, that can definitely impact your strategy into it. So really knowing your course before and being able to practice to a point of what you can in training is beneficial.
So you just said then, Amy, that could be anywhere between 5 and 8 hours. And if I'm doing some quick maths here, I don't have a calculator in front of me, but from the quick maths in my head, if you're looking to get 90 plus grams per hour of carbs, that's a lot of carbs.
Yes, it definitely is. I will say I I made a huge mistake. I forgot my electrolyte bottle in the car for the race. And so it was a cupless race. So I knew that I was not going to have any electrolytes that I thought I would other than my gels, but they get pretzels. So I was definitely like just about licking the bag of pretzel after eating it to get all salt possible to help with that, preventing that electrolyte imbalance. But I will say I was definitely not on the 90 side. I was closer to the 60 side, but I did lose some from not having my electrolyte bottle that did have some carbs in it as well.
And that must be a big issue, right? Like, say if you got a mishap and you couldn't get fluids or something like that. I think even if you're getting that in, if you're a big sweater, if you're someone that listens to this and you're a big sweater, it's probably a lot of fluid you've got to get in each hour, right? Like, is there a point where, yeah, you could probably be a little bit dehydrated and it's okay? And then is there like a cutoff or like a critical point, I suppose you could call it, where it's like you can't go lower than that or you're really going to see it and you're almost going to hit the wall or bonk just from that?
About a 2% loss of fluids can lead to a decrease in performance. So it's definitely possible. It definitely happens. So that's why it's so important to stay on top of your water and like check in with yourself. Like, when was the last time I drank water? Do I need to increase it more? And especially if you're doing a trail race where there isn't a water station every mile, like there can be in marathons, like making sure that you have enough to get you to that next aid station to where you can fill up on water again.
In those longer races, say like 20 hours, you're obviously a lot about the environment is changing around, even night and day, and then you could get complete weather changes. Like I was just in Sydney down south yesterday, and I think we woke up and it was sunny, and then it was just, it was really cold, and then we were in a torrential downpour in the space of, freaking 8 hours or something like that. If you're out there running and that's happening, does any of that play into how you're handling your nutrition?
It can. I mean, it can just change how like your body's feeling. Like, are the temps starting to dip at night? And do you not have a jacket with you versus during the day it was 90 degrees and full sun? That is definitely going to impact your performance, can even impact like how you're able to take in those calories and those carbs.
I think that's a pretty good covering over. If you're listening to that, then you can eat pizza or pasta. I think that's going to be the absolute takeaway everyone's going to take from this. But I want to get just your thoughts on, because I think a lot of people do running, right? Like, I think the barrier to entry to running is so low. That's why it's so popular and it's so rewarding. Like you said, when you get that runner's high, like it's such a like addictive feeling and people love it. What are the biggest challenges that you find for runners in general that they face, especially when it comes to their nutrition?
Ooh, a challenge when it comes to nutrition. I would say some of it is just not knowing. And I think with a lot of messages that individuals see, like from social media and just hearing like other people talk about like dieting, restricting, those type of things that don't help you become a stronger runner, that can really decrease your performance, decrease your energy, where you're just like, I'm exhausted all day, like whether I'm running, working, trying to keep up with kids or life type of thing. And so I think that has a big impact on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I've got a couple questions here that I did get on the Instagram here, and I'm going to throw these at you, and it's going to be a curveball. So let me
All
know if
right.
these are outside of your scope. But this is a cool one. What are your favorite top three nutrient dense foods and why?
Ooh, I love this question. So I will say eggs are definitely one of those foods because it's a relatively inexpensive source of protein. You're also getting some really good fats from it as well. Second, I would say sweet potatoes, great source of carbs, potassium. And number three, ooh, I feel like I need to say Pop-Tarts after this conversation, but um, can I stick with two since those two came to the top of my? Okay.
Yeah. Three's a lot to get off the top of your head. I get that. This is an interesting question. How important is anti-inflammation protocols pre and post running from a diet perspective?
It can definitely help make a difference in that recovery process as well, especially like after that run, if you're able to, reduce that inflammation, that stress that was going on after that workout, it's going to help you come back faster, and that during that next workout, when you're starting it, you're not going to have as much inflammation in your body. And so that's not just through nutrition, but also like what are those recovery pieces that you can be doing to help reduce the amount of inflammation that you have?
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Here's a good one, and I'm sure you get this all of the time. What are the pros and cons of fasted cardio?
Yes. lots of questions about that. So I'm going to talk specifically when it comes to longer. So the only pro that I can think of is that it can help your body burn more fat for fuel, which can help during a marathon to prevent you from hitting a wall when your glycogen is all used up, that your body can turn to fat. But the con is it takes so much energy for your body to break down the fat for energy. It is so much more efficient at breaking down the carbs. And that means more energy can go to fueling those muscles to run faster versus, wasting so much more and breaking down that fat for fuel. There's also been studies that have showed increased cortisol levels with fasted running, sleep disturbance. There are so many things that I just do not recommend it. I understand if you're doing a 3-4 mile run and running right away in the morning, that is a different story than if you're going to be running for more than an hour and trying to do that fasted.
So if someone did ask you, should I be doing fasted cardio, what would you say?
I would not recommend. I've had clients that would do a 3 to 4 mile run fasted, and I'm like, can we just try? Like, let's just try, like, half a banana. And they're like, okay, like I wasn't as sore after that run, which I think that is pretty impressive that, they were noticing a little soreness, not enough to probably make a huge difference, but the fact that it pretty much completely went away because their body had the energy to perform and also that recovery piece as well. I think that's something that comes into play, like, oh, is my body even going to break this down and utilize it by the time my run is over? And maybe it won't, but if it doesn't, that is just going to help jumpstart that recovery process for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer. This is a bit different and it's a little bit outside the scope of nutrition, but I think you touched on it a little bit before with like running on the rocks and whatnot. But this question is, what are your thoughts on different foot strides to improve running?
Ooh, I will say that is a little bit outside my expertise. I am not a run coach, but I do know that individuals will try to like work on their cadence in order to become like more efficient, can help with speed and that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember listening to something, it was very interesting. They were talking about how, especially on those really long ultra endurance runs, that the runners will actually like change their foot stride like strategically so they don't fatigue as many muscles in their legs. And I thought that kind of like might sound weird if you're doing like a 10K, but like you said, if you're out there for like 250 miles, and that probably makes a bit of sense, right?
Yeah, it definitely does. Like switch it so like one side of your foot can kind of rest, and then a little bit later switch it so the other side.
Because I know for a fact I had a very interesting experience in North Carolina where I went beach dirt biking. It was like fat biking, sorry. And it was in the sand, and it was like exceptionally way more tough than what I gave it credit for when I rocked up. I was so naive to how tough it was going to be. And this is what the guy said to me. He's like, you've got to change your foot position to use different quadriceps muscle. And I was like, well, that would have been very nice if you told me that 2 hours ago before we did this, because I am absolutely dying. The last question, and I think we've gone over this at length, but I think this is a nice one to finish on. How much carbs do you need for longer distance run a marathon?
So I would definitely, when it comes to the pre-marathon, aiming at having at least 50 grams of carbohydrates per both in your pre-run fuel. You might even have some in that pre-run snack that you would have about 15 to 30 minutes before the actual start of the race. And then you're right, as we mentioned, aiming for 30 to 60 grams per hour while you're running the race.
Excellent. Amy, thank you so much for going over all of that. That is so much good information if there's any runners outside you have just got a short little masterclass on how to fuel yourself for your running. But if they want to go one step further, they want to reach out, they want to use your expertise and get coached by you, how's the best way to go about that?
You can send me a message on Instagram, as Jordan said, the_running_dietitian, or you can check me out on my website, hear more about my coaching philosophy at longrunnutrition.co.
Excellent. Well, Amy, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure I'll get you on again and we could talk more.
Yes, I always, like I said, love talking all things nutrition and running.
All right. Thanks so much, Amy.
Thank you.
And there it is, another episode of the TFD Performance Podcast. If you are a runner and you want to know more about how to fuel your training and races, then following Amy is an absolute must. Do you have any other questions about running nutrition? Then send us a DM on our socials and we will connect you with Amy for a chat. This podcast will be available through the podcast app, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and if you follow along our socials at _Fight Dietitian, you can see all of the best bits from our podcast episodes. Thanks for listening in, and I'll see you guys for the next episode of the TFD Performance Podcast.